There was a table between us, an envelope, and her hand pushing it back toward me like I was nothing. She looked me straight in the eye and said, "You get nothing." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't beg. I didn't even move. I just sat there, calm as Sunday morning, and said 5 words that froze the air in that room. Look who's coming. If you've ever been spoken to like a child by someone you raised, you know that feeling. It's not anger at first. It's confusion. It's that moment when you think, did I hear that right? And then it happens again and again, until one day you realize it wasn't a slip of the tongue. It was control. If silence was ever mistaken for weakness in your own home, by your own blood, then you'll understand what I'm about to tell you. This isn't a story about money. This isn't about who gets what when I'm gone. This is about respect, about the line between caring for someone and being controlled by them. Stay with me, because what happened next, she never saw coming. She thought she was in control. What happened next shocked her. My name is Robert. I'm 67 years old. I worked 43 years in the same manufacturing plant, came home every night to the same house, sat at the same table. I'm not the kind of man who raises his voice. Never have been. My father taught me that a man's strength isn't in how loud he can get. It's in how steady he can stay when everything around him is shaking. I raised my daughter, Emily, the same way. With patience, with presence, with love that didn't need to prove itself every single day. Her mother passed when Emily was only 9. Cancer took her in 6 months, so it was just the 2 of us. I learned how to braid hair from a YouTube video. I learned how to talk about things I didn't understand, just so she'd feel heard. I worked double shifts so she could go to college without debt. I never asked her to pay me back. I never kept a ledger. That's not what fathers do. At least, that's what I believed. Emily grew up strong, confident, capable. I was proud of that. I thought I'd done something right. She became a lawyer, moved back to town, started her own practice. We had Sunday dinners. We talked about her cases, her life, her plans. I listened more than I spoke. I thought that's what good fathers did. Step back, let them lead, let them grow. I thought letting her take charge of things would teach her responsibility. I didn't realize it was teaching her entitlement. See, I never demanded respect. I assumed it was there, built into the foundation of everything we'd been through together, like a load-bearing wall in an old house. You don't think about it until it cracks. And when it cracks, you don't notice right away. It's subtle. A little shift here, a small comment there. You tell yourself it's nothing. You tell yourself she's just busy, just stressed, just trying to help. But deep down, something starts to feel off, like the ground beneath you isn't as solid as it used to be. I'm not a man who looks for conflict. I've spent my whole life avoiding it, actually. I've seen what anger does to people. I've seen families torn apart over things that didn't matter. So I chose peace. I chose patience. I chose to believe that love would always win in the end. But here's what I didn't understand back then. Silence isn't always peace. Sometimes, silence is just the space where respect used to be. Emily and I never fought. Not once. Even when she was a teenager, we talked things through. I was proud of that. I thought it meant we had something special, something rare, and maybe we did. But somewhere along the way, that respect I thought was unshakable started to erode. Not all at once, not with a bang, just slowly, like water wearing down stone. And I didn't see it happening. Or maybe I did, and I just didn't want to believe it. Because when you've spent your whole life building something, you don't want to admit the foundation is starting to crack. It started small. So small I almost didn't notice. Emily began handling things for me. Little things at first. She'd say, "Dad, let me take care of that paperwork for you. You've got enough on your plate." And I'd thank her. I thought she was being thoughtful. I thought she was just trying to help her old man out. Then it was bigger things, my insurance renewal, my property taxes. She'd show up with documents already filled out, just needing my signature. "I already went through it all," she'd say with that confident smile. "Trust me, Dad. This is easier if I handle it." And I trusted her. Why wouldn't I? She's a lawyer. She knows this stuff better than I ever could, so I signed. I didn't read every line. I didn't ask questions. I just trusted. That's what you do when you love someone, right? You trust them. But here's the thing about trust. It's like a foundation. When it's solid, you don't think about it. You just build on top of it, higher and higher, assuming it'll hold. But if that foundation starts to shift, even just a little, everything above it becomes unstable. And I didn't see the shift happening. Not yet. Emily started making decisions without asking me first. She'd call the doctor's office and reschedule my appointments. She'd talk to my bank about my accounts. She'd handle conversations with contractors when something needed fixing around the house. At first, I thought, well, she's busy, she's just being efficient. But then I started noticing something else. She'd speak for me. We'd be out somewhere, maybe at a restaurant or a family gathering, and someone would ask me a question. Before I could even open my mouth, Emily would answer. "Oh, Dad's doing fine. He's taking it easy these days." Or, "He doesn't really keep up with that anymore." Little comments, small redirections, but they added up. It was like I was slowly being erased from my own life. And the worst part, I let it happen. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself she was just trying to help. I told myself that keeping the peace was more important than making a fuss over small things. But those small things? They weren't small. They were cracks. Hairline fractures in the foundation. And I was ignoring them because I didn't want to believe my own daughter would ever see me as less than I am. There was this one moment that should have been a wake-up call. We were at her office. She was going over some documents with me, something about updating my will. She slid a folder across the desk and said, "Just sign here, here, and here. I've already gone through it with my partner. It's all standard." I picked up the pen, but then I paused. I said, "Emily, can I take this home and read it first?" She laughed. Not a mean laugh, but the kind of laugh you give a child who just said something silly. "Dad," she said, "you don't need to worry about the legal jargon. That's what I'm here for. Just trust me." And I did. I signed. But that laugh stayed with me. It echoed in my head for days, because it wasn't the laugh of a daughter reassuring her father. It was the laugh of someone who thought I couldn't understand. Someone who thought I needed to be managed. And that's when the foundation cracked. Not loudly, not obviously, but deep down, in a place I didn't want to look, I knew something had changed. She didn't see me as her father anymore. She saw me as a problem to be solved, a responsibility to be managed, an old man who couldn't be trusted to make his own decisions. And I realized, in that quiet, terrible moment, that silence wasn't keeping the peace. It was surrendering the ground I stood on. The shift didn't happen overnight. It was gradual, like watching a building settle on a compromised foundation. You don't see it moving, but one day you notice the doors don't close right anymore. Emily started treating me differently, not with anger, not with cruelty, but with something worse, condescension. She'd pat my shoulder when she talked to me, the way you'd comfort a confused child. She'd use this tone, soft and slow, like I couldn't quite keep up anymore. "Dad, let me explain this in simpler terms," she'd say when we talked about anything important. And I'd stand there, a man who'd read contracts for 43 years at the plant, who'd negotiated union deals and managed teams, being talked to like I'd forgotten how to think. She started making decisions about my life without even pretending to ask anymore. She changed my phone plan because the old one was too complicated for me. She told my neighbors I wasn't up for helping with the community yard sale anymore, even though I'd never said that. She canceled my subscription to the newspaper and signed me up for some digital thing I never asked for, then got frustrated when I said I preferred the paper. "Dad, "You need to adapt," she'd say. "This is how things work now." But it wasn't about the phone or the newspaper. It was about who got to decide. And somewhere along the way, she'd decided that person wasn't me anymore. The real turning point came at a family dinner. My brother Tom was there with his wife. We were talking about a trip I was planning, just a weekend fishing up north with some old friends from the plant. I was excited about it. I'd been talking about it for weeks. Emily cut me off mid-sentence. "Actually, Dad's not going on that trip," she announced to everyone at the table. I looked at her. "And what do you mean I'm not going?" She smiled that patient smile. "Dad, we talked about this. It's not safe for you to be out there alone at your age. What if something happens? What if you fall? There's no cell service up there." "I won't be alone," I said. "There'll be 4 of us." "Dad." She put her hand on mine like I was being difficult. "I know you want to go, but it's just not realistic anymore. You have to start thinking about these things." My brother Tom looked uncomfortable. His wife stared at her plate, and I just sat there, feeling something inside me crack wide open. Because she didn't ask. She didn't suggest. She didn't express concern and let me make the choice. She decided. And she announced it to my family like it was already done. That's when I realized this wasn't care. This was control. She'd stopped seeing me as her father and started seeing me as her responsibility, like I was something fragile that needed to be managed, protected, kept in a box where I couldn't make mistakes. And the worst part, everyone else just accepted it. Nobody questioned her. Nobody looked at me and said, "Robert, what do you think?" They just nodded along, like of course Emily knows best. Of course Dad can't be trusted to make his own decisions anymore. I didn't argue that night. I didn't fight. I just went quiet. And Emily took that silence as agreement. She took it as proof that she was right, that I needed her to run my life. But that silence wasn't agreement. It was something else. It was the moment I stopped trying to convince her I was still capable. Because when someone's already made up their mind about who you are, no amount of explaining will change it. You can't argue someone into respecting you. Respect isn't something you win in a debate. It's something that's either there or it's not. And I realized, sitting at that table, that Emily had lost respect for me a long time ago. Maybe she didn't even realize it. Maybe she thought she was being a good daughter, protecting her aging father from himself. But protection without permission is just another word for control. And I'd had enough. After that dinner, something changed in me. Not anger, not bitterness. Something colder, something more deliberate. I stopped arguing. I stopped explaining myself. I stopped trying to prove I was still capable of making my own decisions. Because I realized something important. When you're dealing with someone who's convinced they know what's best for you, words don't matter. Explanations don't matter. The more you defend yourself, the more you look like you need defending. So I went quiet. Not the kind of quiet that comes from defeat, the kind that comes from clarity. Emily noticed right away, but she misread it completely. She thought my silence meant surrender. She thought it meant she'd finally gotten through to me, that I'd finally accepted my place in this new hierarchy she'd built. She'd call and tell me what she'd decided, and I'd just say, okay. She'd show up with more papers to sign, and I'd sign them without reading, without asking questions. She'd cancel plans I'd made, and I wouldn't protest. And with each passing week, she grew more confident, more comfortable, more certain that she was in control. But here's what she didn't understand. Silence isn't always weakness. Sometimes it's the loudest thing in the room. Sometimes it's the space where people reveal who they really are because they think no one's watching anymore. I started paying attention, really paying attention, to the documents she brought me, to the conversations she had on the phone when she thought I wasn't listening, to the little comments she'd make to other people about managing Dad's affairs and making sure he's taken care of. I watched the foundation she thought she'd built, and I saw every crack, every weak point, every place where she'd cut corners because she assumed I'd never notice. She thought she was building something permanent, but she was building on sand. There's this thing that happens in construction, something I learned back in my days at the plant. When you're tearing down a building, you don't just swing a wrecking ball at it, not if you want to do it right. You study the structure first. You find the load-bearing walls. You figure out which supports are holding everything up, and then you remove them, one by one, in exactly the right order. That's called controlled demolition. It looks calm from the outside, quiet, even, but it's the most powerful form of destruction there is, because it uses the building's own weight against itself. That's what I started doing, not with violence, not with anger, but with patience. I let Emily think she'd won. I let her believe that her authority was absolute, that her control was complete, and while she was busy congratulating herself, I was studying the structure. Every decision she'd made, every document she'd filed, every assumption she'd built her power on. I wasn't plotting revenge. I was preparing for justice. There's a difference. Revenge is emotional. It's messy. It's about making someone hurt the way they hurt you. But justice is clean. It's precise. It's about restoring balance, about putting things back in their proper place. And it doesn't require you to raise your voice or lose your temper. It just requires you to be smarter than the person who underestimated you. Emily had made one critical mistake. She'd assumed that because I stayed quiet, I wasn't paying attention. She'd assumed that because I didn't fight back, I didn't have any fight left in me. She'd mistaken patience for weakness, silence for surrender. And that assumption was about to become the crack that brought everything down. Because when someone thinks they've already won, they stop being careful. They stop watching the door. They stop checking the foundation. And that's exactly when the ground shifts beneath them. 3 months after I stopped fighting back, Emily called me. Her voice had that tone, the one she used when she'd already made a decision and was just informing me about it. Dad, we need to meet. There are some things we need to finalize. She didn't say what things. She didn't ask if I was available. She just told me when and where. Her office. 2 o'clock on a Thursday. I said okay. I showed up 15 minutes early. The receptionist smiled at me with that pitying look people give to old folks, like just walking through a door is some kind of achievement. Mr. Patterson, Emily's expecting you. Go right in. I walked into her office and she was already sitting behind her desk, papers spread out in front of her like she was preparing for trial. Professional. Cold. Efficient. This wasn't my daughter. This was a lawyer about to close a deal. Have a seat, Dad, she said, gesturing to the chair across from her like I was a client. I sat down. She slid a folder across the desk, thick, official-looking, the kind of folder that holds documents that change lives. I've been working with my partner on this for a few weeks now, she said. We've restructured everything to make things simpler. Your accounts, your property, your healthcare directives. It's all here. This way, when the time comes, there won't be any confusion. Everything will be handled properly. When the time comes, like I was already gone, like I was already a problem that needed to be solved after the fact. I looked at the folder, but didn't touch it. What exactly is in here, Emily? She sighed, that patient sigh she'd perfected. Dad, it's all standard stuff. Power of attorney, updated will, trust arrangements. I'm making sure you're protected. That everything you've worked for goes where it should. And where's that? I asked. She smiled, not warmly, professionally. We can go through it line by line if you want, but honestly, it's a lot of legal language. The important thing is that I'll have full authority to make decisions on your behalf. Medical, financial, everything. That way you don't have to worry about any of it. Full authority. Those 2 words hung in the air like smoke. I looked at my daughter, this woman I'd raised, this person I'd sacrificed everything for, and I saw it clearly now. She wasn't protecting me. She was erasing me. She was taking everything I'd built, everything I was, and putting it in a folder with her name on it. And she expected me to just sign it away. To thank her for it. Emily, I said quietly. Did you ever think to ask me what I wanted? She blinked. surprised by the question. Dad, I'm doing what's best for you. You know that. Best according to who? Her jaw tightened, just slightly. Dad, I don't have time for this. I have another meeting in 30 minutes. Either you trust me or you don't. There it was. The ultimatum. The line in the sand. Sign this, or prove you don't trust your own daughter. It was brilliant, really. Cruel, but brilliant. Because what kind of father doesn't trust his daughter? What kind of man fights against someone who's just trying to help? She'd backed me into a corner where any resistance would make me look paranoid, ungrateful, senile. But here's what she didn't know. I'd been in this corner before. I'd been studying it for 3 months. And I'd found the way out. I reached for the folder. Her face relaxed. She thought she'd won. I opened it slowly, flipped through a few pages, then closed it and pushed it back across the desk toward her. No, I said. Just that. One word. Her smile faltered. Dad, you're not understanding. I understand perfectly, I said, and my answer is no. The air in that room changed. I could see it in her eyes. Confusion, then frustration, then something harder. Dad, you're being unreasonable. Maybe, I said, but it's my life, and I'm not signing it away. She stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. Fine. Then you're on your own. Don't come to me when things fall apart. I stood up too, slowly, calmly. I won't, I said, and I walked toward the door. But I didn't leave. Not yet. Because this was the moment I'd been preparing for. The moment where the foundation she'd built on sand finally started to crack. I stood there at that door, my hand on the handle, and something washed over me. Not anger, not sadness. Clarity, pure, cold clarity. I thought about all the moments that had led to this. Every time I'd stayed quiet to keep the peace. Every time I'd signed something without reading it, because I trusted her. Every time I'd let her speak for me, decide for me, treat me like I was fading away. And I realized something that changed everything. She'd prepared for an argument. She'd prepared for me to get emotional, to raise my voice, to prove her right about me being unreasonable. She had responses ready for every objection I could make. She'd probably practiced them, but she wasn't prepared for silence. She wasn't prepared for calm, and she definitely wasn't prepared for what I was about to do. See, there's something people don't understand about power. Real power isn't loud. It doesn't need to announce itself. It doesn't need to threaten or intimidate. Real power is quiet. It's the kind of strength that comes from knowing something the other person doesn't, from holding a card they don't know you have. I'd spent 3 months watching, learning, preparing. While Emily thought she was consolidating control, I was studying every move she made, every document she filed, every conversation she had, every assumption she built her authority on, and I'd found something she never thought I'd look for, because she never thought I was capable of looking. I turned back around. Emily was still standing behind her desk, arms crossed, that look on her face like she was dealing with a stubborn child. Dad, if you walk out that door, don't expect me to clean up your mess when everything falls apart. I walked back to the desk, slowly, calmly. I pulled out the chair and sat back down. She looked confused now, off balance. What are you doing? She asked. Sit down, Emily, I said. My voice was steady, quiet, but there was something in it that made her hesitate. She sat. I leaned forward, my hands folded on the desk between us. You know what I've been thinking about these past few months? I said. I've been thinking about foundations, about how you build something that lasts. You know what the most important part is? She didn't answer. It's not the height. It's not how impressive it looks from the outside. It's what's underneath, the foundation. And if that foundation has cracks, if it's built on sand instead of solid ground, it doesn't matter how tall the building is. Eventually, it comes down. Emily's jaw tightened. What's your point, Dad? My point, I said, is that you've been building something. You've been building control, authority, power over my life. And you thought the foundation was solid. You thought because I stayed quiet, because I didn't fight back, that I'd just let you take everything. I paused. Let that sink in. But you made one mistake, Emily. You assumed I wasn't paying attention. Her face changed, just slightly. A flicker of something. Uncertainty. Maybe fear. What are you talking about? She asked, but her voice wasn't as steady anymore. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out my own envelope, thinner than hers, but heavier. I placed it on the desk between us. Open it, I said. She stared at it like it might bite her. Dad, what is this? Open it, I repeated, calmer than I'd ever been. She reached for it slowly, pulled out the papers inside, and started reading. I watched her face, watched the color drain from it, watched her eyes widen, watched her hands start to shake just a little. Where did you get this? She whispered. Does it matter? I said. What matters is that I know. I know everything, Emily. Every decision you made without asking me. Every document you filed in my name. Every account you moved. Every corner you cut because you thought I'd never notice. She looked up at me, and for the first time in months, I saw something I hadn't seen in a long time. She saw me, not as a problem, not as someone to be managed, but as her father, the man who'd raised her, the man she'd underestimated. Oh, Dad, I can explain. I held up my hand. I don't want explanations, I said. I want you to listen. Emily was staring at those papers like they were written in a language she couldn't understand. Her hands were trembling now, just slightly, and I could see her mind racing, trying to figure out how I'd gotten this information, trying to figure out what it meant, trying to figure out how to regain control of a situation that was slipping through her fingers like sand. Dad, this isn't what it looks like, she started, but her voice cracked. Just a little, just enough for me to know she was scared. Emily, I said, my voice still calm, still steady, I'm going to ask you one question, and I want you to think very carefully before you answer. She looked up at me, her eyes wide. When you started making decisions for me, when you started taking control of my life, did you ever stop to think about what you were taking from me? Not the money, not the property, but my dignity, my autonomy, my right to be treated like a man who still has a mind of his own. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Because that's what this has been about, hasn't it? I continued. You convinced yourself you were helping me. You convinced yourself I needed you to manage my life because I couldn't do it myself anymore. But the truth is, Emily, you weren't protecting me. You were controlling me. And there's a difference. I could see tears forming in her eyes now, but I didn't stop. Not because I wanted to hurt her, but because this needed to be said. These words had been building for months, and they needed to come out. I let you do it, I said. I stayed quiet. I signed the papers. I let you make the decisions. And you know why. Because I wanted to see how far you'd go. I wanted to see if you'd ever stop and ask yourself if what you were doing was right. If you'd ever see me as your father again, instead of just a problem to be solved. She was crying now, silent tears running down her face. But you didn't stop, I said. You just kept going. And now we're here. I stood up slowly, picked up her folder from the desk, the one with all her documents, all her plans for my life, and I held it in my hands for a moment. Then I set it back down. I'm not signing this, I said. I'm not giving you control over my life. And I'm not going to let you treat me like I'm already gone. Emily wiped her eyes, trying to compose herself. Dad, please. I was just trying to help. I know what you thought, I said, but you were wrong. There was a long silence, The kind of silence that feels like the air has been sucked out of the room. And then I heard it. A knock on the door. 3 sharp raps. Emily's head snapped toward the sound. "Who is that?" she asked, her voice tight. I looked at her, and for the first time in months, I smiled. Not a warm smile, not a happy smile, but a smile that said everything was about to change. "That," I said quietly, "is what happens when you build something on a cracked foundation." Another knock. Louder this time. Emily stood up, confusion and fear mixing on her face. "Dad, who did you call?" I didn't answer. I just looked at her, calm as Sunday morning, and said the words that would change everything. "Look who's coming." Her face went pale. She knew. In that instant, she knew. This wasn't just about papers anymore. This wasn't just about control. This was about consequences, about justice, about the moment when someone who thought they'd won realizes the game isn't over. The door opened. The man who walked through that door was someone Emily recognized instantly. I could see it in her face. The way her expression shifted from confusion to recognition to something close to panic. It was Gerald Hoffman, 72 years old, retired attorney, and the man who'd been my lawyer for over 30 years. But more than that, he was the man who'd helped me draft my original will back when Emily was still in high school. The man who knew every detail of my estate, every account, every property deed. The man Emily thought had retired and disappeared into some quiet life of golf and grandchildren. She'd never thought to check if he was still practicing. She'd never thought I'd reach out to him. She'd assumed, like she'd assumed so many things, that I was too passive, too trusting, too old to think that far ahead. Gerald walked in with a briefcase, his movements slow but deliberate, and he nodded at me with the kind of respect you give to someone you've known for decades. "Robert," he said simply. Then he turned to Emily. "Ms. Patterson." His voice was professional, measured, but there was something underneath it, something that made the temperature in that room drop 10 degrees. Emily stood frozen behind her desk, her hands still gripping the papers I'd given her. "Mr. Hoffman," she managed to say, her voice barely steady. "I didn't know you were still practicing." "Semi-retired," he said, setting his briefcase on the table. But I make exceptions for old friends, especially when they call me with concerns about family matters. He emphasized those last 2 words just enough to make Emily's face go even paler. Gerald opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder, thicker than the one Emily had prepared, and set it on the desk between us. "Your father came to see me 3 months ago," he said, looking directly at Emily. And he had some questions about certain documents that had been filed in his name, powers of attorney, account transfers, property deed modifications, all very professionally done, I might add. Your legal training shows. Emily's mouth opened, but no words came out. Gerald continued, his tone never rising, never accusatory, just stating facts like he was reading from a case file. "The problem, Miss Patterson, is that several of these documents were filed without your father's full understanding of their implications. Some were signed under what we might call undue influence. And a few, well, let's just say the signatures don't quite match the ones we have on file from previous years." The room went completely silent. Emily finally found her voice, shaky and defensive. "I was protecting him. I was making sure everything was in order. I'm his daughter. I have every right—" "You have the rights your father grants you," Gerald interrupted, his voice still calm but firm as steel. "Not the ones you take." He turned to me. "Robert, do you want to proceed?" I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. I saw the fear in her eyes, the realization that everything she'd built was crumbling. And I saw something else too. A glimpse, just for a second, of the little girl I'd raised, the one who used to hold my hand, the one I'd do anything for. But that little girl had grown into someone who'd forgotten where she came from, who'd mistaken my kindness for weakness, my silence for surrender. And now, she was about to learn what true stories of family revenge really look like when morality and justice stand on the same side. I looked at Gerald and nodded. He opened the folder in front of him and began laying out documents, one by one, like he was building a case in court. And in a way, he was... "Emily," I said, my voice still calm, still measured. "For 3 months, I let you think you were in control. I let you believe that my silence meant I didn't understand what you were doing. But I understood everything. Every document you filed, every account you moved, every decision you made in my name." She tried to speak, but I held up my hand. "Let me finish," I said. When you started taking over my life, I could have fought you right away. I could have argued, raised my voice, made a scene, but I didn't. You know why? Because I needed to see the full picture. I needed to see how far you'd go, and I needed to document every single step. Gerald tapped one of the documents. "Your father came to me 12 weeks ago," he said. "He brought copies of everything you'd filed. We went through them together, line by line. And what we found was troubling. Powers of attorney signed under pressure, financial transfers that weren't properly disclosed, healthcare directives that gave you complete authority without proper witnesses." Emily's face was white now. "I didn't do anything illegal," she said, her voice shaking. "I was protecting him." "Protection requires consent," Gerald said. "What you did was assume authority you were never granted. And in some cases, you forged that authority." The word "forged" hung in the air like a verdict. Emily's eyes went wide. "I never forged anything. Dad signed everything." "Under duress," Gerald said. "Under misrepresentation. You told him these were standard documents. You told him not to worry about the details. You used your position as his daughter and as an attorney to manipulate him into signing away his autonomy. That's called undue influence. And in some jurisdictions, it's considered elder abuse." Those last 2 words hit Emily like a physical blow. She stumbled back into her chair, her hands shaking. "Dad, please," she whispered. "I never meant to hurt you. I was just trying to help." I leaned forward, my eyes locked on hers. "Emily, do you remember what you said to me 20 minutes ago? You pushed that folder across the desk and told me to sign. And when I asked questions, you told me I didn't need to understand the legal jargon. You told me to just trust you." She nodded, tears streaming down her face now. "And do you remember what you said when I refused?" I continued. "You told me I was on my own. You told me not to come to you when everything falls apart. You were ready to walk away from me, your own father, because I wouldn't give you complete control over my life." My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "That's when I knew," I said. "That's when I knew this wasn't about protecting me. This was about power, about control, about you deciding that I wasn't capable of living my own life anymore." I stood up slowly, picked up Gerald's folder, and held it in front of her. "Everything you did is documented here. Every transfer, every signature, every conversation. Gerald and I have spent 3 months building a case. Not because I want to destroy you, Emily, but because I need you to understand something." I set the folder down on the desk between us. "You don't get to decide when I stop being your father and start being your responsibility. You don't get to take my life and put it in a filing cabinet with your name on it. And you don't get to treat me like I'm already gone while I'm still standing right here in front of you." The silence in that room was absolute. Emily was sobbing now, her head in her hands, and I felt something break inside me. Not anger, not satisfaction, just sadness, deep, aching sadness for what we'd lost, for what she'd thrown away. I didn't raise my voice, I said quietly, because I didn't need to. Real power doesn't shout, Emily. It doesn't beg. It doesn't break down. It just stands firm and says no. And that's what I'm doing. I'm saying no. No to your control. No to your manipulation. No to being treated like I don't matter anymore. I looked at Gerald. He nodded and began gathering the documents. What happens now is up to you, I said to Emily. You can fight this. You can hire lawyers and drag this through court and turn this into a war. Or you can accept that you made a mistake. A big one. And you can start trying to earn back the respect you lost. I turned toward the door, then stopped and looked back at her one last time. I'm still your father, Emily, and I still love you. But love doesn't mean letting you destroy me to make yourself feel important. That's not love. That's control. And I'm done being controlled. I walked out of that office with Gerald beside me, leaving Emily sitting there with the weight of everything she'd done pressing down on her shoulders. The door closed behind us with a soft click, and I heard her sobbing through the wood. Part of me wanted to go back. Part of me wanted to hold her like I did when she was 9 years old, and the world felt too big and scary. But I didn't. Because sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let someone face the consequences of their choices. That's not cruelty. That's respect. It's believing they're strong enough to learn from their mistakes. 2 weeks later, Emily called me. Her voice was different, smaller, humbler. Dad, she said, can we talk? We met at a coffee shop, neutral ground, and for the first time in over a year, she didn't try to control the conversation. She didn't tell me what to order or where to sit. She just waited. I've been thinking a lot, she said, her hands wrapped around her cup like she needed something to hold on to. About what you said, about what I did. And you were right. I wasn't protecting you. I was controlling you. And I'm sorry. I looked at her, really looked at her, and I saw something I hadn't seen in a long time. I saw my daughter, not the lawyer, not the woman who thought she knew better than everyone else, just Emily. I forgive you, I said, and I meant it. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean pretending it never happened. She nodded, tears in her eyes. I don't expect you to trust me right away. I know I have to earn that back. You do, I said, and it's going to take time, but I'm willing to give you that time, because you're my daughter, and I love you. But things are going to be different now. And they were. Emily stepped back. She stopped making decisions for me. She started asking instead of telling. She started listening instead of assuming. It wasn't perfect. There were moments of tension, moments where old patterns tried to resurface. But we worked through them, together, as equals, not as a parent managing a child, or a child managing a parent, but as two adults who respected each other. That's what this whole story comes down to. Really. Respect. It's not something you can demand. It's not something you can take. It's something that's earned through actions, through choices, through how you treat the people you claim to love. And when that respect is lost, when someone mistakes your silence for weakness, your patience for surrender, sometimes you have to stand up and remind them who you are, not with anger, not with violence, but with clarity, with strength, with the kind of quiet power that doesn't need to raise its voice because it knows its own worth. I'm 67 years old. I've lived long enough to know that family revenge isn't about destroying someone. It's about restoring balance. It's about making sure that morality and justice walk hand in hand, even when it's hard, even when it hurts, even when the person you're standing up to is someone you'd give your life for. Because true stories aren't always comfortable. They're not always neat and tidy with happy endings tied up in bows. Sometimes they're messy, sometimes they're painful, but they're real, and they matter. If you've ever been in a situation like mine, if you've ever been controlled by someone you raised, or disrespected by someone you sacrificed for, I want you to know something. Your silence doesn't have to mean surrender. Your patience doesn't have to mean weakness. And standing up for yourself doesn't make you the bad guy. It makes you human. So wherever you're watching this from, whatever situation you're facing, remember this. Respect isn't demanded. It's lost when silence is mistaken for weakness. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is simply say no, calmly, firmly, without raising your voice, because real strength doesn't shout, it just stands its ground, and that's enough.